Welcome summoners to another ProGuides Wild Rift video. My name is Terry and today we'll be providing a brief overview of the history of Wild Rift Esports, analyzing newsworthy competitive events in order to speculate the game's success in the future. From the LPL and LCK having their own face-off, reputable organizations from all around the world starting their own teams, and even Riot's direct engagement with the scene, Wild Rift Esports is surely ramping up. When Wild Rift Esports initially began, there wasn't really any professional coverage. Casters for tournaments were scarce, spectating features were non-functional, and prize pools were too modicum to allow for any sustainable growth. People expected great things from the game off the bat, but without the guidance and active support of Riot, Wild Rift Esports definitely started off a little rocky. Many players on professional teams hopped around, frantically attempting to find a home to settle in. For those of you competitive players watching the video who have been around, I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about. Anyway, for those who don't, at the very beginning there simply wasn't enough money in Wild Rift to pay all the pro players. This resulted in only well-known pre-existing players to secure their spots on rosters, leaving many aspiring professionals alone to fend for themselves. For players who were not getting paid, victory in tournaments was their only real source of income. And since tournaments didn't offer a lot of money in the game's initial stages, it was really difficult for professional players to commit to a team. What resulted was that most of the players kept looking elsewhere, especially if they didn't experience victory in the tournament that they participated in. After all, what incentive is there for the player to stay on a team that doesn't pay them? Seeing as how Wild Rift is a team game, this didn't bode well for the esport as a whole. Before we move on, we have our question of the day. Have you guys ever watched Wild Rift Esports? If so, what was your experience with it? Be sure to address the question of the day in the comments down below. Without much further ado, let's dive right back into it. With pro players precariously drifting in the wind, and organizations lacking the funds to solidify a roster, Wild Rift Esports' initial stages were pushed by small communities and extremely committed players. These community leaders and players hoped their efforts would eventually grow fruit, and thankfully, Riot eventually stepped in to ensure the game's continued growth. By pretty much throwing money at the esport at key moments, investing in the game's future, it's thanks to Riot's helpful interference that large organizations feel confident in investing into the mobile MOBA. We'll discuss more on the exact ways that Riot is securing the game's future later in the video, but for now, let's go over the different organizations that have recently entered the scene. These organizations have a very broad history of success in esports, coming from various different backgrounds. In the beginning, most of the organizations and teams in general migrated from pre-existing mobile esports, such as Call of Duty or Arena of Valor. For many of these organizations, Wild Rift was just the next logical step in their mobile esports conquest, serving as a ripe opportunity to enter the realm of Riot Games' competitive gaming. As briefly mentioned before, esports organizations need money in order to pay their players, and since the beginning phases of Wild Rift Esports were a little shaky, there was simply too much risk for certain companies to commit to the creation of a team. As more stability and general game growth became evident, other organizations began to step in. These generally already made a name for themselves in League PC, and are simply transitioning to dominate the mobile realm. KT Rolster and T1, both Korean esport organizations, recently created their Wild Rift roster. They have been around for ages and have been very renowned in their field. KT was actually founded in 1999 with the sole intention of creating a team for StarCraft. Talk about history. Eventually, they created a team for League of Legends, and have since experienced large success in the LCK. But in regards to League of Legends, KT Rolster pales in comparison to T1, who holds the record for winning the most League of Legends World Championships in history, and have become literal legends in the esports industry. Both teams now have Wild Rift rosters, ready to explore uncharted territory. It's hard to tell exactly how strong Korea's LCK teams will be in Wild Rift. Historically speaking, the nation has had abundant success in League of Legends, making a name for themselves as one of the best regions for League. League players will literally bootcamp in Korea since the playing environment is frankly the most intense in the world. The only region that can hold a candle against the LCK is China's LPL, rivaling the LCK in esports achievements. The LPL, for those who don't know, have been going incredibly strong in League of Legends esports. Their teams have been able to take over League of Legends Worlds, sweeping through many of the other regions with ease. The only team capable of stopping their reign in League of Legends Worlds was the LCK's Damwon Gaming, who managed to crush Suning in their homeland in 2020. Now, why is this information relevant? Well, the LPL and the LCK will be facing off in an intense 3-round tournament. Wild Rift Rivals 2021 will be a show match featuring retired League of Legends pros from China and Korea. The invitation should be very entertaining to watch, allowing the audience to see long since retired players return to the competitive stage, albeit only for a brief moment and on a game that's not exactly the same as the one they played. But that's not all. The main event will feature 3 LCK and 3 LPL Wild Rift teams who will compete for a share of the 90,000 prize pool. The LCK teams are KT Rolster, T1, and Sandbox Gaming, 2 of which were actually mentioned previously. The LPL teams are Edward Gaming, BDB Gaming, and oh my god, with the main event occurring over the course of 4 days. The competition will be played across 3 rounds, followed by a final. In each round, 3 LCK teams and 3 LPL teams will compete against each other. August 11th, 12th, and 13th will be set aside for the first 3 rounds, with the finals occurring on the 14th. The tournament should be streamable both on YouTube and Twitch, so be sure to check them out. The results from this tournament will help set the pace for the future rivalry between LPL and LCK in Wild Rift, providing the players a place to represent their country and for spectators to catch a glimpse towards intense competition between 2 powerhouse regions. Since they're such dominant regions in League of Legends esports, both regions are especially important to keep close eye on. After all, Wild Rift is League of Legends Mobile. Therefore, the LCK and LPL will undoubtedly be prepared for the fierce competition ahead of them. In addition, the prize pool and general results from the tournament will allow for the winners to solidify their name in Wild Rift. The resources from the winning are sure to go a long way in expediting the process of becoming, for lack of a better word, successful. Of course, League of Legends and Wild Rift are still separate games on completely different platforms. This makes it hard to know how strong they really are compared to the rest of the world, seeing as how many of the teams and regions simply have not had the opportunity to compete with one another. Maybe China and Korea won't actually be that impressive, or maybe the Philippines will just completely dominate, seeing as how big mobile gaming is there. But regardless, having such recognizable names and teams compete allows Wild Rift Esports to have more brand recognition and coherence, a prime example of Riot's beneficial interference and of the esports' growing future. Though they weren't heavily involved during the initial stages, Riot is now undoubtedly putting in work. One of their main methods for supporting the competitive scene is by creating a framework of tournaments for Wild Rift players to participate in. These tournaments pay many times more than the majority of events organized by the community. This means more people will inevitably participate, and once the money goes into Wild Rift, it means more resources to support the culture surrounding the game. Riot is essentially pumping money into the system, attempting to build a foundation for players to stand on. Many of these competitions tie together, with winners from certain regional competitions qualifying teams for the annual World Tournament. This is huge, since mobile esports have yet to create a truly global experience. Other games, like Mobile Legends and Arena of Valor, have had huge competitions with international participants. But having a yearly, regular international event with the primary purpose of bringing the best teams together is still unheard of in the realm of mobile gaming. There simply hasn't been a game successful enough to sustain the needed resources to successfully hold annual international competitions. By publicly stating their purpose to create an independent, competitive esport ecosystem, Riot is utilizing their brand name to secure the game's future. Riot Games has executed worlds for League of Legends exceptionally year after year, allowing the player base to trust in their hefty promises and therefore invest more into Wild Rift's developing competitive scene. I still remember the very beginning of Wild Rift Esports and honestly how jank it used to be. The competitive scene has come a long way, growing alongside the game itself. With events like the LPL vs the LCK coming up, along with Worlds further down the line, now's the best time as any to be a Wild Rift fan. To help you guys stay up to date with everything Wild Rift, be sure you subscribe to the channel and like the video if you enjoyed the content. Before you head out, don't forget to address the question of the day in the comments down below, and until next time, stay safe and please don't be toxic in your games. I can't tell you how many games I lose just cause some random people start arguing. Anyway, have a good one guys.